In some small communities, there's a sense of camaraderie among neighbors looking out for one another and for one another's children. The only strangers are outsiders. This lends children the freedom to wander on their own and gives parents the comfort of knowing that they'll return home safe.
But when one independent, streetwise boy went missing in Jefferson City, Tennessee in 1983, the feeling of small-town safety vanished with him.
Today on Dark Matters, we're going to be talking about the disappearance of David Warner.
David Clayton Warner's life was unconventional from the start. Born to his 16-year-old mother on January 30th, 1971, he was diagnosed with epilepsy the same day.
His mother, Barbara Warner Soares, was unmarried and unemployed, but she and her family ensured David had the best they could offer.
His grandmother, Faye Warner, legally adopted David, raising him in her home on Beeler Avenue, fulfilling the maternal role in his life. As David grew older, he came to know his biological mother and aunts Kathy Nash and Addie Maples as older sister figures. David, nicknamed Little David, also had his uncle Paul David Warner, or Big David, to look after him, along with neighbors Bob and Joyce Mabe.
Perhaps growing up surrounded by so many caring guardian figures lent to his friendliness towards people of any age. To David, it seems there were no strangers, only new friends. He often offered to help carry groceries or even fetch something from the store for neighbors.
Still, at 12 years old, David wasn't ignorant of danger. He possessed street smarts beyond his years, wandering around town and to the arcade with his friends. Even local police knew David as a mischievous soul, but never witnessed him cross the line into delinquency. Former Jefferson City Police Chief David Hutchison called him a good, likable boy.
David seemed to struggle with academics. His report cards held him back in the 4th grade at Jefferson City Elementary. Perhaps it was the classroom environment, though, as everyone knew him to be intelligent, and there were certain subjects he excelled in.
Wednesday, March 2nd, 1983. Report card day at Jefferson City Elementary. David returns to Beeler Avenue after school, excited about his A in physical education. Neighbors Bob and Joyce Mabe claim that David seemed intent on going to a gathering at the small church just a few doors away from home. But after stopping at the church and glancing inside, he continued past it down the street. Instead, he headed to Druthers Restaurant, now El Sazon, just a couple of blocks away. At the time, Druthers had a policy. Children with good grades on their report card received a free meal. For his A, David was rewarded with a free hamburger and soft drink.
Now, at this point in my research, there is some conflicting information.
More recent reports claim he stopped at the corner of Odell and Sycamore Lane, and that this was his last known location. Other recent reports claim family last saw him walking down Beeler, close to Broadway, his preferred route to convenience stores or restaurants such as Druthers, where he went for his free meal. The Charlie Project and older reports mention David going to a friend's house after eating at Druthers, where he watched television until about 7 p.m. Around this time, David reportedly said he was going back home, just 30 yards away, somewhere on Beeler Street, circled here.
It's unclear if David's last reported sightings occur before or after his meal at Druthers, before or after he goes to his friends, or even if he ever went to his friends. What is clear is that by morning, David was gone.
Thursday, March 3rd, 1983. David's Aunt Addie wakes to find his bed apparently occupied, but upon closer inspection, she finds it empty. The covers were arranged to appear as though David was asleep beneath them, but he was nowhere to be found. Family checked with the Mabes, where he sometimes spent the night, and with other friends, but no one had seen him since the day before.
Faye Warner immediately reported her grandson missing.
A massive air and ground search by the Jefferson City Police, firefighters, a rescue squad, and over 200 volunteers yielded no trace of David. Sheriff Tom Esslinger at the time said, "We're about to come to the conclusion now that he might have just run away from home or gone to another state or county."
I can't say exactly why police believed this. Perhaps it was David's known street smarts and the fact his bed appeared staged to give the illusion that he was in it.
However, family doesn't buy the runaway claim. Because there was no evidence of foul play either, no solid conclusion could be reached. He'd essentially vanished without a trace. Months passed without any new leads until an unnamed source reached out to police.
This source claimed David was living in Miami, Florida with his biological father's cousin, a man named Ivan Red Wilson.
After contacting Miami authorities and sending them a picture of David, a detective scouted around Red Wilson's address and saw a boy who bore a strong resemblance to David in the vicinity.
Police informed David's biological father, Edgar Wilson, of this development.
Edgar claimed he knew nothing about his son's disappearance or current whereabouts, but he had received a strange printed letter which he handed over to the authorities.
I'm going to quote it as it was quoted in my source, including the errors.
Edgar, if your son is at your cousin's in Miami, you better do something now. Someone has told them that you do. An unknown friend.
By the time police caught up with Red Wilson, he had moved out of the address where authorities thought David might be and denied any knowledge of the boy's disappearance.
The months-long investigation ended with Detective Hutchison questioning the original source's credibility, saying, "I am satisfied that David was not in Florida with Mr. Wilson." Despite David's face being plastered on milk cartons across the country, his case was frozen. No other leads have been publicly announced, if there are any.
Jefferson City PD claims there's very little evidence to point them in any given direction, so we're left with theories.
In the immediate aftermath of David's disappearance, rumors circulated that he'd witnessed a crime and was taken to prevent him from talking.
However, there seems to be no substance to these claims. Police initially believed he'd run away, but now wonder if David's disappearance was something more sinister.
Theory number 1, father. In an interview in 2013, David's aunt, Kathy Nash, voiced concerns that David's father, Edgar, who reportedly passed away, had something to do with his disappearance.
Authorities stated he might have had motive if he believed his son would be better off with him.
Kathy told WVLT News, "I think his natural dad had something to do with it, because he was the type of person who liked to be in the spotlight, and by him never coming to help hunt for David, I always felt he knew something." If you'll recall, Edgar claimed he knew nothing about his son's disappearance or whereabouts, and police seemed to rule out their tip on his cousin in Miami. We also don't know much about Edgar from public information, and he reportedly wasn't alive to defend himself at the time the comment was made. I think it's also good to keep in mind that Kathy Nash said this in 2013. 5 years have passed, and perhaps she feels differently now, or perhaps not. I can't speak for her current beliefs. Which leaves us with theory number 2, abduction. David was abducted by a stranger or unknown individual. If this is what occurred, it's possible David knew his captor, or even if he didn't, he might have trusted them. He befriended others easily and was well liked by all who knew him. Family and law enforcement have echoed similar sentiments. His aunt, Kathy Nash, said he would have thought nothing about getting in the car with a strange person. Uncle Paul David Warner added that There are a lot of cruel people in the world, but David thought everyone was his friend. I think he could be talked into going with someone if they tricked him with, "Help me find my puppy," or something like that. Law enforcement agrees that the possibility of abduction is still worth investigating, with Detective Hutchison saying, "I think David was lured into a car, possibly by someone he knew. For what reason, we don't know."
And unfortunately, as is the case with so many of these missing people, we may never know. Officers who worked David's case said that there were no solid suspects and that his disappearance continues to haunt them.
The lack of answers leaves a grieving family lost, wondering who their bright and friendly little David might have grown up to be, and if there's any hope he'll ever come home.
Kathy Nash thinks about David every day and currently runs the Facebook page Find Little David Warner to keep his name in the public eye.
David's biological mother, Barbara, says her head and her heart are in conflict. Her head tells her he's no longer alive, but her heart hopes he can come home someday.
The in-between of not knowing has been hell for both her and her mother, Faye Warner, who adopted David and raised him as her own.
Faye never stopped thinking of David and reportedly always had hope, often saying one day he was going to walk back in. Faye Warner passed away in 2007, but on her deathbed was still asking, "Have you found little David yet?" Law enforcement hasn't lost hope either. Detective Roland Holt recently told the media, "This case file has always remained open and will always remain open until we find out what happened to David. We know someone out there knows. Please come forward. Let's put this to rest." David Clayton Warner is a white male with blonde hair and brown eyes. He suffers from epilepsy and had 2 prominent front teeth. Standing at 5 feet 2 inches to 5 feet 5 inches and weighing 110 pounds, he was last seen wearing a black and white Pittsburgh Steelers sweatshirt, blue jeans, and sneakers. If alive today, he would be 47 years old. If you have any information regarding David Warner's disappearance, please contact the Jefferson City Police Department at 865-475-2002. A special thank you to the Patreon family. In light of the demonetization of most new Dark Matters and Nameless episodes, their financial support is crucial for the channel's mission to spread awareness of cold cases, including David's. If you are interested in becoming a patron, information is in the description, but even if you only continue to support by watching, thank you.
My heart goes out to his family, community, and friends. They've gone too long without answers, and we all hope for closure. And no matter what you choose to believe or what you speculate, I ask you only for respect in the comments below, both for David and his family. And thank you for giving David's case a moment of your time. And remember, though these may be dark matters, the darkness always matters.
Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to pick up your Cameo merchandise by November 1st if you want to support the channel and receive some merchandise in exchange. Thank you for always receiving these cases openly and respectfully. Stay safe, friends, and have a good night.